questions and the peripheral stuff.
Yeah, we could actually do that later after we've got
Yeah.
the main text.
Oh, that's good. That's good. We could do like a voiceover sort of.
Yeah, you can do
Oh,
voiceover.
Great.
Yeah,
Well, that's fine with me because, see, it's easier for me to start drawing.
right.
And then things will occur to me as I'm drawing, or I'll make a mistake and I'll say, this is a mistake because, and then I'll go on.
Right.
So,
Okay, well, we're pretty much ready to roll.
okay.
Now, in terms of when he's drawing, how close do you want me to get to the drawing? I mean, I can zoom in so that you get pretty much just his hand if you want.
I don't think you need that. Yeah, I don't think you want to see a close-up.
Right, you
Okay.
probably don't, because you want people to know what his whole body's doing.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
And not only that, but it's going to be going like from top to bottom. It's going to take up quite a bit
Okay.
of space. They're not going to be small things.
Just checking.
Yeah, for the moment, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah, he's working at the scale of the whole board, I mean, up and down.
okay. So I can get the whole board. I'm actually already running, I'm cheating on you guys.
Very
Bounce that
quiet.
back. Oh yeah. And so I would say just give it a pause after I'm done talking to you, and then start, because the pause is always good, because that gives me something to edit with.
Well, I'm going to start by drawing some horizontal straight lines. And I'm going to try to make them as straight and as even and as smooth as possible. Suppose it doesn't do too much good to talk to the board, because you probably can't hear me back there, right? I'm really now just concentrating on keeping the lines, concentrating on keeping the chalk from breaking every foot and a half. Just concentrating on making the lines parallel and even, and stopping on line, and starting on line. And actually you can go down a whole page this way, and at first it's a little bit shaky, and then gradually you begin to pick up a little facility, a little alacrity, and I think there's even a point of no return where you can go so far that you begin to kind of lose it and everything gets sort of wobbly. So you have to sort of find out what your longest and most controlled line is. Now I'm up close. You'll be sitting at your tables drawing, and you'll be able to sort of see both ends simultaneously, so you can tell whether these things are lining up. I have a little problem with that, being up here so close to the drawing. Ah, well. Now, I might want to stand, geez, probably should have gotten some reinforced chalk. Ow, this is ridiculous. I think I'm going to have to bear down a little less firmly. Actually, firm is sort of good because it helps to make the lines stay smooth and straight. And that's okay with a pencil, but with chalk, and especially with the chalk that they're making these days, it gets, I think, a wee bit problematic. Now, folks, I'm going to stand back just a little bit and see what it is that I'm doing, and it's not particularly great. It's sort of coming in here. I guess the spaces between lines are fairly good. There's a little boo-boo up in here. All right, so one would just do a whole page of this sort of thing, maybe several columns, maybe 2 or 3 pages until you begin to sort of get the feeling of it. And then the next step after that would be like a variation on this. And it would go something like this. It's more fun, it's more interesting, it's more visual. And it would be to start not quite as long, but with a fair amount of space between the lines. And you gradually and simultaneously do 2 things. You begin to get the lines closer together, and you begin to sort of control your starting and ending points so that you get almost an hourglass shape. out of the whole thing. And you have to be able to think about 3 or 4 things simultaneously, and at the same time keep the same amount of control that you had for the upper exercises. And I probably should keep my mouth shut so that I can think more about the space between lines and the beginning and ending, and not so much about what I'm saying. Okay, getting close, getting to the point where they're almost touching, and they are getting very short. And that one was a little too wide. And the next one is a little bit closer. Okay, when I get down to the point where I think it's just a wasp waist sort of an effect, I'll begin to go back in the other direction. I'll begin to sort of open this thing up, make the lines a little bit longer, and try to control that funny curvature on the outside edge. I'm not even sure that I'm getting a curve. I might be getting sort of straight edges on the outside. I won't know until I stand back and take a look at it from a distance. You also get a very spatial look with this. And by that, maybe self-evident, but it looks as if it sort of goes in and then sort of comes out. Then the next line would be just the opposite. Here you would start with lines that are short, close together, and they're going in diametrically opposite ways from the first set that we just did. And I'm aware of this configuration on my left, but I'm really concentrating on the one on the right. Once again, trying to get the lines smooth, even, looking like they're ruled, perfectly horizontal, thinking about the curvature of the end here, and the interline space, and getting it at its widest point right down here. It hurts. Yeah. Now that's not good. I think that's... Yeah, this is getting kind of cattywampus here. I don't think I like this one very much. Partly it's working on a strange board with a television camera behind me. Okay. Now we're getting shorter and we're getting closer. And here it would be at its closest and shortest. Actually, when students are working on these at their pads, they're probably doing them a lot more slowly than I'm doing them here. I am sort of going into overdrive on this. Ooh, that looks... Ew, not good. That's really lopsided. This thing is going way, way, way off. Well, let's just try one more set. See if I can sort of straighten this thing out. Vindicate myself in some way. You have to be able to see the whole picture of this. And when you've got your snout right in it this way, you can't see it. Okay, now, widening up. It's very improvisational too. You don't have to get everything exactly right. There's certainly room for manipulation and maneuvering. And now kind of closing down again and running out of space at the bottom of the page. Anyway, you'd go across the page and you'd have these undulations. In fact, even when they're imperfect, they get to be a little bit interesting. I think that's probably enough of these. I don't think I can continue very much longer with that. Oh yeah, let me show you another straight line. I'll keep it straight lines for a while and then sort of get into the curves. There's a very interesting design motif, actually, and it's a Greek motif. And it looks something like this, and you've probably seen it on public buildings in one place or another. And it's called a Greek meander. And it's like a maze. You see that? There's one unit. And everything within this unit, all the spaces inside here are equal. And in fact, it could really be divided into sort of a grid system in which all of the spaces and all of the lines are equal. Now, you have to be able to sort of think ahead. This, Albers used to call a displacement exercise, because what you're doing is you're using up space as you draw. You're actually just sort of taking over the paper and putting an object in there that eats up a certain amount of that white space. When you begin the next one, you just keep going in a long row. When you do the next one, even the space between it and the last one is the same amount of space that you find within these Greek meanders. And you have to think, okay, am I far enough now? Should I stop here? And one way to do that, one way to sort of figure it out, is to think of this thing as being an equilateral triangle. Is this distance the same as that distance? And once you think you've gotten as far as an equilateral triangle would go, then you kind of head south and you stop when you've got it. You already have one over here to act as sort of a guide. You stop so that you've got room to get out, like an escape route. And you come over so many units, you go up so many units, you go over, down. It's like a snail. It's like a squared off snail. Over, down to the bottom, and across, and on to the next one. And after a while, you also begin to pick up a little facility with that. And the further you go, theoretically, the better you get. The next variation on this would be to make it leaning, like it's running. Now this one got a little bit tight in here, and just a little bit funny over there. So it's not really you can see it's not even lined up with this one. This one's kind of fat up here. The tendency, I guess, is to get a little bit lazy and a little bit fast, and then you begin to kind of make a lot of boo-boos. The next variation on this would be to make them lean. I guess you would call it italicizing the Greek meander. And the angle is up to you. You know, you don't give it too much. You don't lean it way over. You just kind of lean it over at sort of a comfortable angle and keep on going. Woo. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ad nauseum. Blackboard drawing is kind of an art in itself. It's sort of funny. It's not like drawing on paper with graphite. Graphite is basically a lubricant, and so the pencil sort of slides across like it's on ice. When you're drawing on a blackboard, it's a different feeling. It's just much more resistant. It sort of drags, and you feel like you're using sandpaper or something of that sort. Anyway, this is the Greek meander exercise. Now, there's something that kind of flows from this. And I think when Albers was doing these things, he was trying to think up things that would test your mettle and make you get some kind of control over your hand and your eye, so that when you draw something, you're not frustrated by it. Because that's one of the big problems with drawing, is frustration. Trying to get something to look like someone or some place or some object, and it just doesn't happen. And he thought that if you could actually get a little bit more control both in your mind and in your hand, that you wouldn't come up against this frustration, and it would be much easier to do the drawing. All right, so the next exercise, and these get more playful. This one is pretty, I don't know how to put it, boring. This one is a little bit less boring. This one's a little bit less boring than that. Then he came up with this idea of just doing a series of improvised parallelograms. Just make a parallelogram, and I think most of the Trinity students know what a parallelogram is, and if they don't, they should. And they're all hinged together. You start with one, and then you take a common side, and then you just improvise an angle for another parallelogram, and you try to get it right the first time. That is, you shouldn't have to go over and then sort of come back and leave that or erase it. Try to avoid erasure. He, in fact, didn't even let us use erasers. We had to take blue and red pencils and correct on top if we made a mistake, rather than just erase, because that way it's sort of like cheating. And if you make an honest mistake, he wanted you to make an honest correction, and you could see it if you did it in a colored pencil. So I'm going to just wing it here, improvise, and see if I can't get it right the first time. This should be parallel to that. This should be parallel to that. And I didn't have too much overlap there, so I think I'm getting these done fairly well, because I'm warming up too, as a matter of fact. It's even a little bit warm in here. And they can overlap in a transparent way too, sort of on top of each other. That's kind of fun to kind of go back and see it almost as it's made out of plexiglass or cellophane or something like that. I'm just going to spin a bunch of these little buggers out here. And our students do pages of this. I mean, it just fills pages and pages and pages. And you have to sort of look around. Oh yeah, we'll go down here. Here we go. Here we go. And this would be like that. Whoops, you see? Missed. Should just kind of connect, just hit. It's a very nice feeling, actually. It gives you a great feeling of satisfaction. Now, it looks like a mad folding box, and that's the feeling that you should get with it. And once you've got this thing all over the page, the next step is to imagine if you could put a hole in the middle of every one of these things, if you could just like cut a circle in it, what would that circle look like? And, well, this one is almost like it really isn't leaning in any way. It's got 90-degree angles all the way around. So it's probably one of the easier ones to think of as having a hole in the middle. Now we're getting into the curved lines. And you have to kind of see if you can't just make a tangent at the four sides and feel convincingly like that circle is actually on that plane, facing in that direction. Now, it's going to be a little bit different down here because this is a plane that theoretically you're seeing obliquely from an angle, so you're not going to have a real circle in there, you're going to have an ellipse. And the ellipse, if on that surface, would look something like this. You see that? And here, it would look something like this. And you actually try to make it feel as if you're drawing right on that surface. That you are not just doing this as a hypothetical thing on a board, but you're actually on that plane which is flopping in a certain direction. And so you go through the entire group, and I'll show you something interesting when I get through. Yeah, now see, this is kind of narrow, so you don't really get a very wide ellipse, you get a rather narrow ellipse. And you really have to, when you've got a corner like this with an acute angle in it, you really have to go into it. When you've got an angle in a corner that is obtuse, that's more than 90 degrees, you really go sort of catty-corner. You go slowly through that, but you go tightly. You really dig into these acute angle corners. So let me just finish this off. Nice crack in the board here, which doesn't, forget it. Wait a minute. This one needs redoing. Something very sensual about drawing too. I don't know if you've ever experienced it or if you guys have done much drawing, but it is, to me, very sensual, just like pulling these things around and seeing them work. And here it goes up like so, down like that. This one is very, you're seeing it right looking along the edge, so it's got to be very thin like so. So now we've got all of these things going in different directions. The way to check it out, to see if you actually did the right thing, is to look at these little leftover corners. These leftover corners. Professor Mason and I had an interesting discussion about this one time. These leftover corners are called spandrels, S-P-A-N-D-R-E-L-S. And a spandrel is sort of an architectural term that means, let's say in a Gothic church, got some windows in it, a spandrel, in a section of wall, a spandrel is the area around the window, kind of the leftover space that nobody thinks terribly much about because they're concentrating upon the shape of the window or the fact that it's got colored glass inside. But the actual leftover space is the spandrel area. And so if you've done it right, this spandrel over here will be exactly the same shape and territory as the one on its opposite side. And this one will be exactly the same amount of acreage or territory or space or whatever you want to call it as the one on the other side. I wasn't thinking of that as I was doing it. It's just like a proof. You could go back and look at these things and say, is this the same amount of territory here as it is over there? It's a little bit more over here, actually, so that's not so great. This one being square, the spandrels are going to be pretty much the same territory all the way around. And is this spandrel about the same as this spandrel space down here? Pretty much, yeah. Is the shape of this one and the amount of this one close to the one over here? Yeah, pretty much. So I think I've got these going fairly well. Now, you may think that spandrels, who cares? Like, why even bother drawing these ellipses as seen from various directions? But so much in life is based upon ellipses. I mean, I'll give you one example, a flower pot. I mean, just looking at the top of a flower pot, it's an ellipse. You're not looking down on it straight from above, so you have to sort of get the ellipse correct. And even the edge down here, which is going to be a little bit fuller, because if you could see through the pot, this ellipse will be fuller than that one because this one's closer to your eye level and that one's further down. And then you come down even further with the pot, and the ellipse on the bottom, of which you see about half, will be another curve like that. And if you could look, if the pot were made out of plexiglass, you could look through and see the ellipse down there, which will be fuller still because it's like a pancake. At eye level, a pancake is a straight line, and as it goes down, you see more and more of the top till you get it way below your eye level, and then it goes back to being a circle again. So, one of the other exercises that we draw in class is a lot of we bring in just plain old terracotta flower pots and draw them at different angles. We actually tilt them, put them, sort of on our tables or on a near table, and then sort of draw them going in all sorts of directions, above, below, whatever. And even drawing like a shoe, drawing a head, drawing an eye, is somehow based upon an ellipse. There's almost everything in life except straight lines. Trash can in the corner, cigarette collector in the corner, wristwatch, stuff all over the place, my eyeglasses. They're all sort of based upon ellipses. And so that's what this drawing helps to get you to see, is what ellipses are, how they work, and how to draw them. And let's see, oh yeah, you can. Going to draw the numeral 2 in a typeface form, and the typeface is actually called Clarendon. And you've probably seen it. And it is also a curving line exercise. It spirals out almost like a snail. Goes out like there. Like this, and then it goes like so, comes down here, up like that, over to here, up this way, in, straight up, and back to where we began. Now, that's another displacement exercise. You have to sort of know where you're going, how far to go. When you get through, the little bugger should fit inside a rectangle. So you actually almost have to visualize that rectangle when you're doing it. And then a step beyond that would be, let's say, drawing one of those parallelograms that we just got through doing over there, and see if we couldn't actually make a 2 happen in there. So it's like a 2 that's sort of falling over or lying down, depending. And this really taxes your abilities. And it's a little bit sort of like the ellipses that we did a few moments ago, but this is like a really complicated, convoluted ellipse. Squeaky chalk. Gives me goose pimples. Okay. Coming up here, going up like so, and back to the beginning again. And so there you are. If this is too difficult for you, I suppose you could do, well, a numeral 1, which is a lot more straight, a heck of a lot more rectilinear, and yet it's in the same, well, kind of ball game. It's still a Clarendon letter form. And maybe we might even start off with this because the other one is maybe a little bit beyond most students' ability to do it first, although it's really kind of interesting the way people pick up on this sort of stuff. And we asked them to do it quite a bit and to practice in between classes, in which many of them do. But there's like a Clarendon 1. It's easier, but it's not all as easy as it seems. Once again, you've got these curves, and this one is a little bit more laconic, and this one is a little bit quicker. And you've got to make this parallel to that, of course. And this little thing at the top has got to come off, once again, feeling almost as if it's an ellipse or part of a circle that sort of goes off like that, if you could see the entire completed thing. So those are the numerical exercises. Oh yeah, then we also like to work with the ability to kind of see things backwards, to actually put sort of a line between one thing and then draw it backwards. What Albers used to have us do is we'd first write, well, the name of the institution on the blackboard. You just say, write Yale on the blackboard in your normal handwriting. And so we would just go, okay, my handwriting is like this, there it is, Yale. And then he would say, now imagine that there's a line here, and what you've got to do is draw a mirror image on this side of the line, so that you have to make your mind go backwards in a way, to see things backwards. That's kind of tough. It's very tough, but it's sort of fun, because it's like a little puzzle. And you have to get everything, just kind of right, and you have to do it. You can't sketch. You notice that with none of these things do I sketch in the normal way that people think of art classes being done, where you're kind of sketching, you're using tentative lines. It's all very definite lines, and no little guidelines to help you out. And you're thinking backwards, and the A leans back in this way, and it comes up just about that high. Then there's a big space, there's kind of a big space in here, and I'm not quite getting that, you see? I sort of managed to louse that up a bit, and it comes back up here, and then it goes down and it out this way. If it goes this way here, it goes that way over on this side. And how far down does it come? And how open is that loop? And where does that loop go? And how high up does it go? And how does it turn? It loops around this way, which is backwards from the way it goes over there, down here, and back up again, ending something like that. And then you would write your own name, or you would write your friend of yours' name. You know, usually not something terribly long, because the further you go, the more difficult it is to actually look back and forth and see how it works. And then another variation on this would be making up just any sort of geometric form. Now this one really drives me nuts. And I must admit that I have, as you will probably see, have some trouble with this one. Just improvise kind of a geometric form. Nothing too complicated, but complicated enough and just right out of the blue. You know, you don't think about it too much. Then, theoretically, you would take a colored piece of chalk and make an axis line through it anywhere you want. You know, you could just do it randomly. In fact, you have to do it randomly. And then you have to consider, how would you draw what's on this side of that axis over on that side, so that you are, once again, getting a mirror image. You'll end up with something that's, well, like this. And I'm thinking about where I'm ending over here. Okay, I'm not sure that that's going to be right, but we'll see. Coming back in here, if it goes at this angle here, then it's going to go at this angle over there, and then it goes up maybe this far, and then it comes down, and here it crosses and goes on the other side and comes up like that. So, bad. This thing is too small, and that thing is too big, but you'll notice that you do get a symmetrical configuration when you do it. I always had trouble with this. There's always a moment when you sort of get into the middle of it, and you freeze, and you think, whoa, what is the opposite of this? So you have to really concentrate as you're doing it. And sometimes people ask for trouble because they start, you know, maybe doing a very complicated form, and then putting a dotted line through it that acts as the axis, and then, well, let's see if I can do it. Let's see if I can vindicate myself here somewhat. Out to there. Okay, and now this goes up here, and then it stops, then it comes down, and it comes back in here, goes up to there, and what the heck happens now? It comes up in here, up to, oh, I'm getting too close there. Back out this way, and back in here, kind of across and down, and out there. Not bad. Not bad, considering I thought it was going to be like impossible, and it is pretty complicated, but the more you do, the better you get. Can we take a break for a moment? I think I may have run out of exercise.
Good for us.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was a little quiet, and I think I was a little looking off to.
You're looking at Bill a little bit for a while.
Yeah.
We'll try not to fire you. You can start over there even if you want. That's fine.
Okay.
Because that's okay. Because I can probably follow your drawing a little better there.
Yeah.
Whenever you're comfortable.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of some adaptations that we can sort of put things together, a little synthesis here of what we've been looking at. I mean, when you think about the parallelogram deal, a parallelogram can become not just one level, but it can become, well, a volume. And I suppose. Let's say I've got an E, a lowercase e, sitting on this surface. And let's see if I can make an E out of what begins to be an ellipse. And it's a lowercase e, and it's got thicks and thins in it, which is sort of interesting. And it comes around like yo. Well, not quite that far. It'll probably stop about here. And then we've got the little counter, or the inside of the E up here, coming around and going like that. Does that look like an E lying on its side? Not yet. Wait a minute, hold on. There we go. Okay. Don't like this very much. Take that out. Going to make it look a little bit smoother. Yeah. Is that an E on its side? Yeah, kind of. Now, if you project that, the side straight down, in the same way that the block that it's being cut from, or built from, or any way you want to think of it, if you think of that sort of coming down this way, you can pretty well imagine what the E would look like down below. And we even have sort of an imaginary inside of that block too. And it would be something like this. I think I'm going to have to stand back so I can see what's going on here. Yeah, okay. The bottom part of the E would be like so. The inside of it would be a repetition of what we've got up above. And we would have like this. Ending on line with this down here. And going in like so there. And if this came down here, we'd be going across the same angle as this is right here. So if I sort of drew this and this and emphasized it a little bit more and took out all of those areas that don't pertain anymore. Let me just see it once again from back here. Actually, this is the sort of stuff I did when I was a kid, and I was doing it just like for amusement. I think when other kids were out playing baseball, I was inside sort of drawing geometric things and not playing baseball. And I would start with maybe a block and then cut pieces out of it, almost like it was a big cheese, and I would be taking chunks out of it to see how it would look if it actually became sort of three-dimensional. I got here. So, like a three-dimensional E. You take away all of the extraneous scaffolding, all the things that don't really belong there anymore, and the cheese stands alone. So what this does is it begins to help students understand volume and form and the way we see. And it even leads them a little bit into perspective. You know, there are courses in perspective, which is like seeing the way things actually appear, how they disappear, get smaller as they go off into the distance, like roads and railroad tracks and things of that sort. And that's a tough subject, and it's very geometrical and very mechanical. Something's supposed to be in there, but you wouldn't see this anymore either. It actually begins to help students see things in perspective, so that they can later on start drawing boxes in perspective without actually having to use vanishing points, horizon lines, and all the paraphernalia of actual perspective. They begin to think that, okay, this top of the box is in fact going off to a vanishing point. This top of the box is going off to another vanishing point. This side of the box is going to a vanishing point. And the vanishing points will all be on the horizon. So that they can actually just sort of imagine this without actually having to do all of the drafting that you usually do when you're in a perspective class. They can actually sort of envision volumes. And this is terribly important in drawing, is that you have, you know, like just the knowledge of oh yeah, this would be coming down here, wouldn't it? Yeah, and this would be coming down here. Left out a couple of important little features. So I have, it tells you something about where this little thing would be visible in here, and that edge would be visible down in there. So there's an E kind of on its side. It's almost like a little bit of architecture too. It could be a funny little circular house with a room divider down the middle. And it ultimately gets into even drawing things like people. I mean, I'm just going to make up a people here. If the person has a collar on, for instance, you might want that collar to appear to be going around their neck. And the collar itself is sort of a cylinder. You know, it's a thing that the neck comes in here and their hair is up there, and the front part of their neck is maybe in here, and then the collar comes around and connects there. It's kind of a large collar, but you begin to sort of get a feeling for volumes. You know, just even the neck. Maybe there's something on the neck, or the way you put in the shadows on the neck that emphasizes the cylindricality of the neck itself. And we obviously get into much more organic things, or even feeling how the underside of the chin actually works, or the jawbone, or the, you know, things like that. You begin to automatically start thinking spatially. You don't see as much of this shoulder as you do of that shoulder, or a seam comes in and begins to define the volume of the arm, or the beginning of the volume of the arm. So that, yeah, a very weird improvised person. It's much easier when you can actually look at a person. But you begin to become conscious of the actual volumes, the way the placket, let's say, of the front of the shirt cascades down. Even the buttons on something like this, you might be thinking about too. Now, how do the buttons, you know, look in elliptical form when seen from one side or the other? Rather large buttons, but you know, you would even see an edge to a button. And so foreshortening becomes part of it, the cylindricality of it, the fact that this wraps around and comes out perhaps on the other side. It goes peekaboo behind here, but you can't see that part in there. All of the things that you're doing over here, dealing with this, what looks like just plain geometry, ends up being used in a very organic way. It's a very thin-necked person there, honestly. And I wasn't really thinking of it as anatomically correct. I'm just trying to give you the feeling for how that gets used in something like this. There's always an application for this. It's not just that you go through life being a person who draws exercises. You end up being somebody who draws real things, perhaps maybe even imaginary things, and you draw them much better because of having gone through this. And you're much more confident about even your use of lines. You know, you don't get nervous and start, you know, equivocating. You just sort of put it in, think about it, correct it if it's wrong, make the neck a little heavier, a little thicker. Think about what's going on down in here. How does the shoulder actually fit into this side over here? What kind of a shoulder do we have actually underneath there? Like you have x-ray vision, you can almost see it. It's awfully good for anatomy. How would the lips be seen if you were lower than the person, if you were looking up at them from down below? I mean, they would begin to kind of go like that. That's all part and parcel of doing the exercises that we've been doing. How would a nose look like from underneath? How would it go up, and kind of go like so? So you can begin to see how these things have an effect upon realism. All right, what's going on in the ear, what's happening up there. So I'm beginning to like carve a person out almost the same way that Guston Borglum cut out the presidents on Mount Rushmore. You begin to sort of think really in masses and spaces, and you've got some kind of control over your hand, and you can make these things happen, even wrinkles, and folds, and creases, and bulges, all the little eccentricities, seams even, that happen in real life. Maybe even the thickness of the collar here would be important to put in so you can see that you're looking at it from the front, that it's got a certain dimension to it, etc. Got it? Can I take a break?
Anytime you want.
She's got possibilities.
Well,
In what
I
How do you know it's a she?
I didn't. I started off as a he, and it looks a little more like a she. But I think it's the get down at the lower part there.
So just be careful about what you say. We are running now, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, we are.
Oh, yeah. So,
Well,
don't say who it looks like.
I'm not.
Who's your favorite professor?
I'm
Oh,
not stupid.
yeah.
I'm stupid, but I'm not that
Who's
stupid.
the chair right now? Okay, that's what it looks like.
Well, I think I'd like to give it a rest. If you don't
Okay,
mind.
sure.
That's great. Because it'll give us plenty to work with.
Really?
Oh, yeah. No, it'll hit many, many themes quite nicely.
Good. I'm not used to working with a camera, so it's
Well-
a little bit funny for me. Sort of speaking at, thinking about it. I'm not sure I was all the time.
No, I think you were pretty natural.
Really?
Because you had the board to work with. I mean, there are people who, if somebody's giving a talk at a camera,
Yeah.
and the audience is your usual prop, and there's no audience, it's really,
Yeah.
really pretty bad. But you didn't have the audience, but you at least
Yeah.
had the board,
Right, right. The board is my friend.
despite the chalk.
That's right. That chalk, damn it, it's so brittle, it just seems to break. Granted, I put some pressure on it.
But, I mean, do you have special supplies in your department?
No, that is our chalk. I mean, I brought it over.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I thought maybe the chalk that we had would be better, but I think maybe, I should have used the little stumps that they had here. I noticed it's all the little short things would probably not break so easily. But I had these long
Yeah,
stumps, and
yeah.
I think that they didn't take the pressure. I tend to put a lot of pressure on it because it gives you more control.
Sure.
You can make a smoother line, and it's also more visible too. I don't like these little tentative lines.
Are you cheating when you take your hand off?
No, you can
Okay.
stop. No, he told us, that's like using the rules.
Right.
Yeah, once you get to a point where you don't know that you should continue or you think you're gonna go off, stop and then, pick up again, maybe come back from another direction. Even turn the page around, or something like that, so you get a bit of purchase on it. So no, there's no stigma with like stopping.
Okay, just wondering.
No, that's a good question.
Well, because it would be different in calligraphy.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
You would have
if
a-
the whole thing is a ballistic act that you're planning
That's right.
and learning how to do in one shot.
Yeah.
This is the exciting part of the video. The top part, zoom in a little more.
How are you intending to use this? Yeah.
Well, a lot of, I mean, we're studying a lot of Gombrich's book, Art and Illusion, and much of it is about, in some ways it's about technique, it's about the fact that no matter how illusionistic somebody tries to make works, that there's a lot of conceptual activity behind it, there's a lot of analysis, there's a lot of formulaic systematicity at a core that then you squeeze around, but you don't just gush out a work, and it's not, the world is good drawers and bad drawers. So it's a way of tying together. I mean, there's also a strong sense of how systems of art sort of interact with the viewers. So viewers get used to certain things, and it's always the pictures in the end that you don't have just, the world doesn't come prepackaged in the head of the artist or out in the world. And then the artist will do a lot on the fly as you're putting something together. So I guess the main thing is if you take the topic of illusionistic, realistic work, you discover that there's a lot more there to comprehend than you might have thought. Stop and you sort of look at the history of work to see sort of all the sort of stylistic variation across time and cultures. You realize that a lot of that's not simply talent, but for a big part of the history, there's a role for discovery. Certain things people didn't know how to do. And once they learned how to do it, they liked it, they preserved it, they milked it. And as long as we didn't have photography, there was a strong sense of a feeling of development and progress over the years. Until capturing an image was not. So, this is a multi-dimensional help to get activity in, to get this feeling of learning about systematicity, learning how to make things look certain ways, but that you're seeing them emerge. That is, you didn't start out saying, let's learn how to make a volumetric E. You had elements that you've been practicing, and you let them grow into things. One of Gombrich's themes is that people often appear in the arts to have developed works off of things that arose somewhat accidentally, but they could see that was going in a nice direction, so they follow it and develop it, and end up with something that's very